This message is to Mr. David Paulides, the leader of the CANAM Missing Project. First, I'd like to start with condolences to Mr. Paulides and his son's passing. I also have important people in my life who suffer from mental illness. And like you mentioned, we're in a spiritual war. With that said, I wanted to say I greatly respect what it is you're doing, and I also share your spirit of defiance against our would-be oppressors, evil forces that seek to prey on others. I too am an appreciator of nature and can see the intrinsic value one gains from spending time in it as much as possible. I think people who are highly sensitive almost need it in order to reset because of this bombardment of energy we're constantly surrounded by, especially in a city. Without further ado, I wanted to add some thoughts I had regarding your case studies, as I've been following your work for some time. And I believe I can offer some further insight into unraveling this plague of a mystery. As you mentioned in your videos, a couple of precautions for those would-be thrill seekers going into the woods. Always check the weather. Carry bear spray. Aim low, as the wind will blow it either in your face or over their head because they run with their nose down. Carry a pistol if you're comfortable with it. Carry a personal locator beacon or satellite phone. Always trust your gut instincts. Tell people where you're going. These are all great pointers. Though I feel what we are dealing with knows a way around all of these measures, as I'm sure you will agree. However, it doesn't hurt to try. Some patterns to take note of for the missing people, as you mentioned in over 100 of your videos, include incidents occurring in cluster zones, sometimes occurring in threes. These locations of disappearances and spontaneous reappearances are often near bodies of water. The most common time of disappearance is 4 p.m. These people are often missing their shoes, parts of their clothes, or wearing something other than what they had on at the time of their vanishing. These people are either never found, are found dead, or if they're alive, miraculously, they can't recall anything, or they are too young to speak. This is indicative of a mind wipe technology Jason Rice, SSP whistleblower, speaks of. It's a small device that resembles a jeweler's hammer, and it can isolate and erase memories. Oftentimes, these unfortunate individuals are either intellectuals or athletes, or they're very young or very old, or they have a disability, which spans a large profile, making it difficult to pinpoint any discernible pattern for the culprit. More often than not, they're bow hunters, elk hunters, or berry pickers, most commonly huckleberries. Often the weather becomes bad right at the time when a search is to be conducted, hindering the chances of survival and or a positive outcome for the search. These people are found sometimes in impossible places with no signs of animal predation or cuts from completing impossible amounts of distance on foot. We may be dealing with a multifaceted phenomenon which combines supernatural elements of the great beyond as well as nefarious characters from our own species. Oftentimes, people have written you describing incidents of dark, eerie silence as if caught in a time loop where the birds stop chirping and fear sets in. As everything is energy, both positive and negative, I agree with your advice to trust your instincts and get out. Sometimes these people are chopping wood, and there's almost always a point of separation. I myself have been lost in the woods at night while on a sleepaway night at summer camp, while I was hanging out with my friends from another cabin, but stayed too late because their campfire died and the sun had gone down, and it was up to me to find my way back to my cabin foolishly with no flashlight. In total darkness, off trail, I stumbled blindly with my arms in front of me, pushing twigs out of the way for at least a mile without so much as a blink of light. The Blair Witch Project had come out in theaters that year, which made this experience all the more terrifying. I thank my inner light for guiding me through this nightmare in the dark as my heart pounded with fear with every step I took until I could finally make out a flicker of light from a far-off campfire. It was then that I knew I would be all right. Character building as it was a lesson in survival, to say the least. People have written to you sharing their experiences with shadowy or dark translucent predator-like entities stalking or watching them in the woods. What I was going to show you, but is no longer available on Amazon Prime, is an excerpt from Jaime Maussan, notable Mexican documentary filmmaker. It's entitled Beyond the Spectrum, specifically the Humanoids episode. And if you fast forward to 28 minutes into it, you might see one of these such entities. It's accidentally captured on a cell phone camera during a youth baseball game. And if you watch the clip I'm referring to, you can see the being was completely invisible to the naked eye. But as you suggested in the past, if you feel something is wrong and you can't get out, film your surroundings, as the camera may capture something your eyes cannot. As the rods and cones in our eyes operate and process light on a limited bandwidth, somewhere between 430 to 770 THz, or 0.0035% of electromagnetic spectrum, emitting infrared and ultraviolet light. Our ears can only detect sound between 20 Hz to 20 kHz, which means there is a lot going on around us we are deaf and blind to. I guess that is what our sixth sense is for. Some are more developed than others, so thank God for our little furry and feathered friends out there for giving us a heads up when something may be wrong. Whether you've ever seen the movie Cabin in the Woods, there's a covert military organization that utilizes a deep underground military base, or DUM, to terrorize unsuspecting campers with a series of created beings they release on innocent human characters. This brings me to my next point about the plane crash, where he saw an illusion against the mountain and then crashed. This cloaking technology has been around for decades and has been spoken openly about by notable ufologist Jacques Vallée in the 1970s, referring to how it was a documented potential plan of action to cause mass upheaval amongst the Chilean people to project holographically an image of Christ walking on water in order to simulate the second coming of Christ, in order to wage political power in that region and destabilize neighboring countries. The powers that be use this technology to surface special access projects. Special access projects, and can be seen demonstrated in such recent films and via soft disclosure in Men in Black International, where the Men in Black set up a metropolitan perimeter in order to safely handle their alien situation, and in the Black Panther film, in order to hide the technology superior city of Wakanda from the general public deep in the jungle. Supposedly, our troops have been sent in to covertly liberate many of these child labor sex trafficking camps in the jungle, but in conjunction with them being cloaked from the soldiers, they are also battling the use of psionic warfare and scalar infotrammetry, which impedes the nervous system, making it difficult to walk. Supposedly, these brave men and women needed to pray to the Lord in order to gain a few steps, as they are made to feel like they are walking in quicksand, only to re-succumb to the power of these weapons. There's also a full-scale monitoring system on the human species, and the intelligence community knows where every single person on the planet is at any given time. And using a directed energy weapon, they can induce cardiac arrest in anyone at any moment. This would explain how some of these people have absolutely no cause of death. This brings me to my next point. The real reason for a partial disclosure of the true nature of reality has nothing to do with mass upheaval or the destruction of religion, as they've been using the divide and conquer tactics on the general public for millennia. They actually encourage us to tear each other apart. The true reason for the last century of treason, crimes against humanity, and never-ending secrecy has everything to do with the elites losing control of their exotic toys. These are reverse-engineered ET tech allows a handful of psychopaths to do whatever they want and mess with the common man at their disposal and will. This brings me to my next point. When you were in Los Angeles visiting your son, you stated you were shocked to see the thousands of homeless living in tents who suffer from addiction and mental illness. From what I understand, once a person is medically deemed mentally ill, they are then fair game to these wealthy elite psychopaths, as well as three-letter agencies, to play with their minds using this technology, known as voice to skull or voice of God. It causes both visual and auditory hallucinations for the victim, giving the outward appearance of schizophrenia. Granted, there are those who are genuinely ill and do require help, if only it were available. I understand this may also be taking place for those unfortunate enough to be admitted at a mental health facility and given the stamp of helplessness. There is an organization known as PACTS, which stands for People Against Covert Torture and Surveillance, that seeks to put a stop to these evil deeds that we come to learn about through people who have reached out to me for assistance. I know multiple people who are experiencing this phenomenon to this day, and I think it's important to shed some light on the issue. There is also a low-frequency mind control technology used by ETs and the shadow government that emits a theta wave and can put entire neighborhoods to sleep. This explains how people disappear from their homes surrounded by pets, and how I saw a Delta anti-gravitic craft in broad daylight surrounded by people, yet I was the only one it didn't work on. This brings me to my next point regarding the missing case of FBI Chief Ted Gunderson, who exposed the satanic rituals and pedophile rings of the powers that be, detailing how victims are selected, lured away, and then snatched for any number of reasons, including, well, the ones that I just listed. This is why all anyone reads in the tabloids for the last 40 years is JonBenet Ramsey, as if to satisfy that latent concern for the poor missing little girl, while TV shows like American Gods, in which the character Mr. Nancy seeks to inform the general public about a million other children that disappear every year. This all serves to show how asleep and unaware the citizens of Earth truly are, and how much work guys like us have laid before us. Indeed, it is a tremendous burden to behold. However, in that truth lies its counterpart, that there is no more righteous or noble cause to undertake, and for that, may the light continue always to shine upon you in your quest for the truth and justice. Whether any of this information applies to you and your personal journey may be subject to time and consciousness. Like King Leonidas, we both have a big problem with kneeling before our would-be oppressors. Some of them may be sold into the intergalactic slave trade, cloned, or bought for ritualistic abuse. These poor people that are disappearing. I leave you with a final case that irks me to the bone, and it serves as an example for the blatant misuse of this technology, and is the baffling case of Mr. Ray Rivera, who was found in an impossible location in the Belvedere Hotel in Baltimore, Maryland, and was called an alleged suicide. The group that would have had to have occurred defied all laws of physics. Yeah, the jump that would have had to have occurred defies all laws of physics. My handwriting is messy, especially when I'm trying to get 15 pages of information out in one leap. Which leads me to believe he was more than likely dropped out of a silent operating craft directly above the point of impact. There are those that would say don't meddle where you're not supposed to and keep your nose out of trouble, but I share your sentiment in that attitude rubs me terribly wrong, and it is this streak of apathy running rampant amongst the fluoride-filled citizens of the earth that allows this evil to continue to operate. We are the many, they are the few, and it's time the earth churned out more people who care about the sort of things you're fighting against. Perhaps with time and patience, people will begin to see the truth and look at it for what it is, so that they stop playing ostrich with their head in the sand and do the shadow work necessary to make a difference. Being a true light warrior, as you full well know, is not always about sunshine and rainbows, but rather requires us to look inside and reflect upon what is surfacing for what it is. No problem was ever solved simply by looking the other way. I personally am recently returning from my 5th time being censored between YouTube and Facebook for discussing dreads and CRISPR technology, so I won't get into that here, but you can contact me about it elsewhere. With that said, I hope this video finds you and finds you well. On the last note, I find it pertinent to mention that while GHB is not among the screened drugs at the coroner, neither is scopolamine, which, with one blow from an invisibly costumed foe hiding in a bush, could render a man with the strongest conviction, a hapless, obedient zombie, content on following any order from anyone, right down to taking their own life. It's something to think about. Kind regards, Godspeed, and God bless.